Chosen ones, God noticed what you did. You've disobeyed him once more. Maya was alone when she first heard it. The silence of her apartment had been heavy enough already, the kind that pressed against the chest and made every creak of the floorboards sound like an omen. She thought it was only her imagination at first, a trick of fatigue, the kind that creeps in when the night grows too long. But then it came again. The voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a weight that made her bones tremble. It wasn't spoken through her ears, but carved directly into her mind, slicing deeper than thunder ever could. Chosen ones, God noticed what you did. You've disobeyed him once more. Her breath caught in her throat. The lamp beside her bed flickered, sputtering as though struggling against an unseen wind. Shadows gathered on the walls, stretching unnaturally, twisting into the outlines of long fingers and hands that seemed to claw their way toward her. Maya's pulse hammered. She clutched her blanket tighter, but the voice was relentless. It was not hers alone to bear. Thousands of miles away, in quiet bedrooms, crowded cities, even in temples and deserts, every marked chosen one heard the same whisper. Men and women bolted upright, trembling, clutching their arms where the faint silver mark burned against their skin. The words carried no mercy, only judgment. Each syllable felt like a blade of guilt, slicing open old wounds they thought had healed. The chosen had convinced themselves their mistakes were buried, their sins drowned in secrecy. But heaven never forgot, and tonight, heaven had spoken. The message spread like wildfire, not through phone calls or news feeds, but through the mark that burned on their skin. Each of the 12 felt the same pull, a silent command that could not be ignored. Some were wrenched from their sleep, others from their work, and one even from the arms of someone they were never meant to hold. The mark glowed faintly, guiding them all back to the place they dreaded most, the ruined cathedral. Once, it had been a sanctuary, the place where their calling began. Now, the roof gaped open to the night sky, its shattered stained glass windows nothing but jagged wounds in the walls. The wind sang through the broken arches like a dirge, carrying whispers that made even the bravest shudder. One by one they arrived. Their faces carried shadows heavier than the night itself. Guilt clung to them, evident in their trembling hands, their downcast eyes. Every single one had done what they had sworn they wouldn't. Every single one had fallen short of the vows carved into their souls. At the center of the cathedral, the altar pulsed with an unearthly glow. What had once been stone now bled light, as if heaven itself had cracked it open to pour its fury through. The light spilled across the cracked floor, crawling like liquid fire until it reached the feet of the gathered 12. Then came the writing. Across the stone tiles, their names burned into existence, each letter seared in radiant script. Maya, Elias, Rafik, Helena, names etched in perfect precision, impossible to deny. One by one, all 12 were branded before their own eyes. A warning. The air grew heavy, pressing down on their lungs until it was hard to breathe. This was no mere gathering. It was a summons for judgment. And each of them knew heaven was not finished with them yet. It was Ezra who broke the silence first. His shoulders quivered under the weight of words he had carried for too long. His lips trembled, his voice cracking as he forced it out. I broke the vow, he whispered, his eyes fixed on the glowing floor as though it might swallow him whole. I killed when I was told never to kill. The word struck like a thunderclap. The air in the ruined cathedral shifted, colder, sharper, as though the stones themselves recoiled. Ezra's confession seemed to unlock something, a dam breaking inside the others. One by one, the sins poured forth. A woman's voice admitted to betraying her own sister, her pride having twisted into envy. Another, trembling, confessed a secret affair that had corrupted everything she swore to protect. A man's voice growled through clenched teeth as he admitted the sin of pride, taking glory that was never his to claim. Desire, greed, lies, betrayals too deep to undo. They spilled into the air like poison, and the cathedral drank every word. The light from the altar pulsed with each confession, as if recording their guilt, binding it to them in chains unseen. The walls groaned. High above, shards of stained glass, cracked long ago, split further, trembling as though heaven itself leaned down to listen. The images of saints, fractured in color, wept lines of dust and broken light. With every word spoken, the air grew heavier. It pressed down on their lungs, made each breath costlier than the last. The silence between confessions was suffocating, broken only by the rustle of clothes, the scrape of shoes against stone, and the faint hum of the marks burning on their skin. When the final confession came, it did not bring relief. It brought dread, because if heaven had heard them, then judgment was no longer far away. The confession chamber of the night had barely ended when the first sign came. A thunderclap split the heavens, violent and sudden, though the skies above were untouched, clear, star-strewn, and still. The sound rattled through the cathedral's broken spires like the roar of a beast awakening. Dust rained down from the fractured arches, and every chosen flinched as if the strike had landed inside their very bones. Then came the fire. Their marks, the silvered brands etched into their flesh, ignited all at once. What had once been faint symbols of calling now blazed like molten metal, searing through skin and blood. The 12 staggered, clutching arms, necks, and palms where the divine seals burned. A chorus of pain filled the cathedral, but no cry could silence the voice that followed. It was not human. It was not angel. It was something that existed before words were ever born. The voice reverberated in the marrow of their bones, echoing from the very walls that had once been sacred. You were chosen for obedience, not pride. You were given light, but you embraced shadow. Disobedience carries judgment. The floor answered before they could. With a deafening crack, the stone altar split down the center, glowing veins of light running outward across the cathedral like fissures of molten fire. The cracks tore open the ground beneath their feet, and from those wounds rose the shadows. They slithered first, crawling like smoke given thought, then grew taller, stretching into shapes half-formed, faceless, and writhing. The air grew bitter cold as the creatures emerged, neither man nor beast, but living remnants of something cast out long ago. Their movements were jerks of unnatural hunger, drawn to the light of the chosen's burning marks. The 12 stood frozen, hearts pounding, the weight of their sins heavy on their shoulders. For the first time since their calling, they understood this was no mere warning. This was punishment made flesh, and the shadows were only the beginning. The voice did not fade. It lingered, shaking the very marrow of their bones, leaving no room for doubt. One chance remains. Face the trial, or be erased. The words struck like iron across their souls. Before any of them could move, the cathedral dissolved around them. The cracked stone, the bleeding light, even the crawling shadows, all shattered like glass. The chosen screamed, though no sound left their mouths. They were not falling, not flying, but being dragged, pulled violently inward into the darkest corners of themselves. Each of the 12 landed in a different prison. Not a stone, not a flesh, but a memory. Maya gasped as the vision formed around her. The air reeked of rain-soaked asphalt, the night thick with the metallic scent of blood. She knew this place. She knew this night. Her chest tightened with a pain sharper than any blade. It was the night she had buried deepest, the night her brother had begged for her. The sound of sirens echoed far away, but she hadn't called in time. She had lied to him, told him she would be back, told him help was coming. And then she ran from fear, from responsibility, from the unbearable weight of choice. She left him there, dying. Now, in the trial, he was not silent. The figure of her brother lay sprawled on the ground, pale and broken, but his eyes flickered open. They were not the forgiving eyes she remembered. They burned with sorrow and accusation. "Why didn't you save me?" he whispered. His voice was thin as a blade, cutting through her like fire. Maya fell to her knees, sobbing, reaching for him, but the ground between them stretched wider, crumbling into darkness. No matter how she crawled, he was always beyond her reach. His whisper grew louder, multiplying, surrounding her like a chorus of ghosts. Why didn't you save me? Why didn't you save me? Why didn't you save me? The mark on her arm seared, glowing brighter with every accusation, branding her guilt into the vision. And somewhere beyond the veil of her suffering, Maya sensed the others were enduring the same torment. Visions of their own sins made flesh, their own betrayals clawing at their sanity. This was no test of strength. This was a trial of truth. Not all among the 12 carried the weight of guilt the same way. For some, repentance burned like a wound they longed to heal. For others, it festered into defiance. It was Jonas who first broke the fragile silence. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial, a hiss that slithered between the stone pillars. "We don't have to do this," he whispered, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "We can run. We don't need to bow, to beg, to obey anymore." At first, no one moved. The words were poison, but poison that carried a strange allure. His whisper found ears already weighed down by shame, hearts that wondered if forgiveness was even possible. For what use was repentance if heaven had already marked them for judgment? "Think about it," Jonas pressed, stepping forward. "We've been used, bound by marks we never asked for. Why should we crawl back to a throne that only threatens us? We can be free. We can claim our own power." Maya shivered at his tone. It was not freedom he spoke of. It was rebellion dressed in silver words. She glanced at the others and saw the fracture forming. Some looked horrified, clinging to the hope of forgiveness. Others lowered their eyes, considering his offer. Desperation made rebellion tempting. A murmur rose among them, sharp and uneven. Accusations, fear, doubt. For the first time since their calling, they were no longer united. Then the cathedral answered. The massive doors at the far end shuddered and slammed shut with a force that shook the earth. Dust rained from the rafters, and the echo of the impact reverberated like a funeral bell. The 12 spun around, their argument silenced at once. The doors did not just close. They sealed. Thick chains of light coiled across them, glowing like molten iron, barring any escape. Whether they sought forgiveness or defiance no longer mattered. They were trapped together, their choices about to collide. It was Jonas who acted first, his face twisted with defiance, eyes burning with a fury that was no longer entirely his own. While the others argued, begged, or prayed in silence, Jonas moved with sudden violence. He rushed the altar, the stone still cracked and bleeding light, and slammed his fists against it. The impact sent a shudder through the cathedral. The divine seal carved into the altar, an ancient mark of obedience, splintered beneath his blow. The glow sputtered, then fractured, shards of light scattering across the broken floor like dying embers. For a heartbeat, silence. Then came the corruption. Jonas staggered back, clutching his arm. His mark, once burning with silver fire, blackened instantly, spreading like rot through his veins. Dark tendrils crawled up his skin, branching, clawing, until his entire arm looked carved from ash. His scream tore through the cathedral, shrill and jagged, no longer human. The others froze. Some cried out. Others could only watch in horror as Jonas fell to his knees, convulsing. His body twisted unnaturally, spine arching as if invisible hands were reshaping him. The shadows that had crawled from the fissures before now surged toward him, hungry, wrapping around his limbs like serpents welcoming their king. "Jonas!" Maya shouted, though she could barely recognize him. His eyes snapped open, black, bottomless voids that reflected no light. His mouth twisted into something between a sneer and a snarl, teeth sharpening into jagged points. The air grew suffocating. The cathedral's very walls groaned under the weight of heaven's fury. Light cascaded from above, not warm but searing, judgment condensed in a fire. It struck Jonas where he knelt. His scream became something monstrous, echoing beyond the human range, rattling every bone of the chosen. They backed away, terror etched across their faces. For the first time, they understood rebellion did not make them free. It made them pray. Jonas was no longer one of them. He was the first to fall. and heaven's wrath had only just begun. The silence after Jonas's fall was unbearable. His screams still echoed in the vaulted ruins, reverberating off the broken stone like a curse. The shadows hissed as they dragged what was left of him into the fissures, his blackened veins glowing faintly in the dark. None dare move. None dare breathe. Then the voice returned. It filled the cathedral, shaking the air, reverberating in their bones. Neither male nor female, neither near nor far. It was the sound of eternity itself. Obedience or erasure. The words were not a suggestion. They were final. The chosen exchanged fearful glances. Each of them felt the crushing weight of the ultimatum. This was no longer about sins past. It was about destiny. Would they bend to the path laid before them, or carve one in defiance? Both roads ended in blood, but one might end in damnation eternal. Elias clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "We were never free," he muttered bitterly. Helena shook her head, whispering prayers through tears. Rafik turned away, unable to meet the altar's light. The fracture among them widened, their fear feeding it like dry wood to flame. Maya's heart pounded so hard she thought it might split her chest. Her brother's voice still haunted her ears. "Why didn't you save me?" And guilt burned deeper than her mark. Obedience felt like chains, rebellion like fire. Both would destroy her, one way or another. But something stirred inside her, a thread of trembling courage. Maybe obedience wasn't safety. Maybe it was surrender. Maybe it was facing the blade and accepting the cut. Her legs moved before she realized it. She stepped forward, each footfall echoing like thunder in the vast silence. The altar's glow intensified, as if watching, judging her every breath. The others gasped, some reaching out as though to stop her, but she did not falter. Her voice shook, raw with fear and defiance all at once. "I choose him," she said, "even if he destroys me." The cathedral trembled. Light flared from the altar, wrapping around her like fire that did not burn. The mark on her arm blazed, brighter than ever before, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The air grew charged, alive with the weight of heaven's gaze. Maya closed her eyes, bracing for annihilation. But no destruction came, only silence, heavy, waiting, as though all of heaven had paused to witness her choice. The choice could no longer be delayed. The moment Maya's vow left her lips, the cathedral responded. The cracked stones pulsed with blinding radiance, beams of light rising like walls around the altar. Heaven itself had drawn the line between obedience and rebellion. The rebels moved first. Fear twisted into fury, and fury into desperate defiance. Jonas's fall had not broken them. It had emboldened them. With wild cries, they turned from the altar, rushing toward the cathedral doors, toward cracks in the walls, toward anywhere that wasn't drenched in holy fire. But there was no escape. The cathedral became a cage. Fire poured down from the open sky, where a roof once stood, ribbons of light descending like chains. The walls of ruin blazed with divine flame, sealing every exit. The rebels struck against them, shouts of rage, fists of shadow, but the light only burned hotter in response. Then came the screams. Their marks ignited, not in silver, but in fire-black corruption. Skin blistered, veins split, and their voices rose in agony as heaven stripped them bare. One by one, the divine brands burned away, leaving charred hollows where once was calling. Their bodies twisted, shadows spilling out like smoke given form, until nothing human remained. Where they stood, only writhing remnants remained, souls erased, husks swallowed by darkness. Those who had chosen obedience fell to their knees, unable to bear the sight. The fire reached them too, but differently. It did not consume, it cleansed. Their marks blazed white-hot, purifying them in searing waves. They collapsed, convulsing every bone, screaming under the weight of judgment. The scars left behind glowed faintly, permanent reminders of failure, yet also of survival. Maya pressed her forehead to the stone, tears burning down her cheeks. The screams of the lost still rang in her ears, clawing at her soul. The line had been drawn, and the 12 were no more. They had been divided, purged, and remade. But in the silence that followed, as the last shadow dissolved into the cracks of the earth, Maya knew one truth with dreadful certainty. Heaven was not finished with them yet. For a long moment, there was only the ragged sound of breath. 12 had entered, but now less than half remained, their bodies curled and broken across the ruined floor. The fire had receded. The shadows were gone. Yet the memory of screams still clung to the air like smoke that would never fade. The survivors lifted their heads, trembling, eyes wide, skin slick with sweat. Their bodies still bore the glowing scars of judgment. They were alive but not whole. Never whole again. Then the voice returned. It rolled through the cathedral like the weight of a storm, steady and unrelenting, yet colder now, sharpened with warning. You are forgiven, but remember, I see everything. Disobey once more, and there will be no return. The word struck heavier than fire. Forgiveness was granted, but not freedom. The survivors bowed their heads as their marks dimmed, fading from molten brilliance to faint silver etchings once more. Yet beneath the fading light, a new truth settled over them like chains. They were not free souls restored. They were prisoners on borrowed time. A shiver spread through the group. Even in survival, fear lingered like an open wound. None dared to speak, but each knew the truth in their hearts. Their lives were no longer their own. Every breath, every thought, every hidden desire would be watched. Always. Maya stared at her trembling hands. The mark on her arm still throbbed, faint but alive, as though it had fused with her heartbeat. Her brother's voice haunted her still, echoing beneath the weight of divine words. She had chosen obedience, but was it truly salvation, or just another kind of trap? She raised her eyes to the broken heavens above, where the stars watched cold and silent. A thought clawed at her, one she dared not voice but could not silence. What if obedience itself is the cage? The survivors left the cathedral scarred and silent, but Maya carried a secret in her chest that burned brighter than fear. A question, a seed, a dangerous thought, and she knew seeds always grow.